Hello from the Central Educational Center. Thank you for joining us for these 2014 Georgia General Assembly Candidate Forums hosted by the Coweta County Republican Party, the Coweta County Democratic Party, and the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce. Tonight's forums will feature two races for the Georgia General Assembly coming up in the November 4th general elections to be decided by voters across Coweta County and this region. We are going to conduct two forums tonight. Our first will feature candidates for Georgia House District 132, Bob Trammell, Democrat, and Gene King, Republican, who are running to succeed retiring Representative Carl Von Epps of Troup County. Our second forum will feature candidates for Georgia Senate District 28 with incumbent Senator Mike Crane, Republican, and his challenger Cynthia Bennett, Democrat. I'd like to thank a number of people who have made tonight's forum possible, starting, of course, with our candidates. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for coming before your fellow citizens and running for this important office, Mr. Trammell and Mr. King. And, of course, thank you for sharing these ideas, your ideas about the many things that are important to Georgians tonight. Tonight's forum is being held in the video broadcast studios of the Central Educational Center Charter and Career Academy. Our special thanks go to the Central Educational Center, to Video Production Director Michael Britt, and to his CEC students and team members who've prepared our setting for the evening and who are recording tonight's proceedings. Thanks also to Georgia Public Broadcasting, who provided some of the sets for tonight's forum. This evening, as I said earlier, is also being brought to you by a partnership of the Coweta County Democratic Party, the Coweta County Republican Party, and the Newnan-Coweta Chamber. Thanks especially to Dennis Thompson, chairman of the Democratic Party of Coweta County, to Mr. Brant Frost, the chairman of the Republican Party of Coweta County, and Candace Boothby, the president and CEO of the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce. I'm Dean Jackson, representing the Chamber's Public Policy Committee. I'll be moderating tonight's forum. Our forum is intended to give voters an opportunity to hear the views of these candidates. It's being offered by our three co-hosting organizations as a public service for citizens here in Coweta County and throughout our region. As such, this forum will remain neutral toward our candidates. Our questions were submitted by members of these hosting organizations. All questions asked tonight will be applicable equally to all candidates. We also thank our audience for joining us here at CEC. In the spirit of tonight's proceedings, we ask our guests also respect the neutrality of our forum and the dignity of this occasion. We'd ask our audience to hold their applause and to hold any demonstration for or against the candidates and their answer as tonight goes on. So, with that, gentlemen, we'll turn to you. First to the candidates in this forum for House District 132, which covers parts of Troup and Coweta County and Meriwether counties. We welcome candidates again, Gene King, Republican, and Bob Trammell, Democrat. Just to mention very quickly, the rules of our forum are going to be very similar to the ones we've used in the past. Each candidate will be allowed a 3-minute opening statement. Our candidates will then be asked a series of questions with a 1-minute answer. Whoever answers first on that, and then the next candidate answers, we will also offer a 30-second rebuttal to the first candidate and, if necessary, to the next candidate who answers after that. Again, we have 1-minute time limits to our questions. We'd ask our candidates to please try to follow those very closely. If your time is up as you're still speaking, just try to finish your sentence, but we will call time if necessary. So, with that, we'll start with our opening statements in a moment so that each of you can tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for the Georgia General Assembly. We took a coin flip a little bit earlier, and Mr. Trammell, you are going to go first, and we're going to stagger our questions throughout the evening. So, Mr. King, you will follow, and then you will answer the first question first after that.
Thank you.
Mr. Trammell, then, please start with our opening statements.
Thank you. My name is Bob Trammell, and I'm the Democratic candidate for House District 132. I grew up in a small town. My granddaddy was a farmer there. He operated a dairy farm. And Granny and Granddaddy believed investing in people. And they believed that investing in their children and their children's education was one of the most important ways that they could spend their money and resources. That dairy farm sent 4 kids to college, my dad and his brothers and sisters. And in my law office, which is in the same farmhouse where my Granny and Granddaddy lived, my dad and his brothers and sisters grew up, there's a milk permit, and I framed it. And I keep it there to remind me that the opportunities that I've had in life, professionally and otherwise, didn't start with something that I did. They started back there on that dairy farm with the commitment and sacrifice that Granny and Granddaddy made. Unfortunately, in Georgia, we haven't made that similar investment in people. Session after session after session, the legislature has cut education funding over the last 4 or 5 years to the tune of $4 billion. Money that would go in our public schools to our kids that didn't make it there because the legislature decided not to invest in people. And we live in a world where the jobs of tomorrow will not be the jobs of today. The jobs of tomorrow will require increased proficiency in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in fact, by the time my 21-month-old daughter Mary and my 18-day-old daughter Virginia enter the workforce, that will be even truer than it is today. We've got to start investing now to prepare our kids and our workforce for those jobs of the future, so that they will be prepared and that we can bring those jobs of the future here to West Georgia, here to Coweta County. Granny and Granddaddy believed that investing in people was the most important thing, the most important way they could spend their money. And I believe that the legislature and we as Georgians should make a similar commitment. I ask for your vote because Georgia should invest in its people, and our children are worth the investment.
Thank you, Mr. Trammell. Mr. King, your opening statement.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Chamber and the Democratic Party and Republican Party for hosting this tonight, and especially all the folks here in the audience that took time out of their schedule to be here. It's enlightening to see people care and concern of what's going on in their community. My name is Gene King, and I'd like to be your next state representative of District 132. Anybody who knows me, has known me over the years throughout Coweta and Meriwether County, knows I'm a straight-talking kind of guy. I usually say what's on my mind, say it like it is, and get straight to the point, and you can always count on me to stand behind what I say. So here's a little straight talk. We don't need any more smooth talkers in Atlanta. We need fighters and we need doers. We need someone that's going to go up there and invest in education, in job training, and reform to the tax code and the criminal justice system, and make government more accountable and open with transparency. So I'm a hardworking kind of guy. I've been working with it with my hands since I was about 13 years old with my family's seafood company down in Florida. And then when I moved here 30-some years ago, I started my own concrete business. So I know what it's like to work hard, play by the rules, and keep your promises. And I will do that if I get opportunity to go to Atlanta and represent the people of District 132. I will put people above politics, and that is a promise. And I would appreciate your support on November the 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you both for your opening statements. We're going to go now to our questions. I'd remind you that each one of these questions will be followed by a 1-minute answer, and then if you so choose, a 30-second rebuttal. Mr. King, you're going to go first. And our first question is about the Georgia economy. Georgia's economy, like that of many states, continues to be affected greatly by a slow recovery following the last recession. State unemployment has exceeded the national unemployment rate throughout much of this recession and recovery. And we recently read that Georgia's unemployment rate has gone up since April, while the federal rate has gone down. What should our state government do to best promote economic prosperity for business and for a strong economy in our state for all citizens? Mr. King.
Well, first of all, I've experienced that firsthand. I've been in business for 33 years here in the county. I used to have 18, 20 employees, and it was just like no end to the work we can get accomplished. And when the recession hit, you know, you go back to 5 employees and you're scrambling to try to stay afloat and make ends meet. And I feel what a lot of people went through during this recession. I think that one of the things I'd like to see done here in our district, and I've pushed it hard and I've been fighting for it just as a community organizer, but so many kids today are going off to school to get an education. They spend 4 or 6 years in college, and when they get out, they're not even able to find a job. So one of the things that I feel is very strong that needs to be focused on in this area, especially with me being an entrepreneur, is we're losing we're losing our trades folks. We're losing plumbers, construction workers, heat and air guys. And there's so many opportunities out here that we could train those who are looking for a job and kids getting out of school that aren't fortunate enough to go off to college. We can give them an opportunity to own their own business, become an entrepreneur, and make good money. Then they can hire the ones that graduate from college to come work for them.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell, same question.
Thank you for your question. Sadly, today, the median household income in Georgia is $6,500 less than it was 10 years ago. That's sliding backwards. And that affects families, it affects the children who are coming up in those families. So the long-term thing that we should do as a state and must do as a state is we must invest in education to prepare Georgia's children for the jobs of tomorrow and to develop those workforce skills that they will need to enter the economy. But as your representative for District 132, I will work every day to be an ambassador for growth and jobs here in our district to make sure that we are recruiting and attracting businesses, small and large, because that is what will grow our local economy, and that's what we need. We need to make sure that our citizens get good paying jobs, jobs they can raise a family on, and jobs that those kids coming up in that family will be able to get a good public education and enter the workforce and have their family.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Mr. King, rebuttal?
No, sir.
All right. We'll move on then to our next question, which is related. This is about Georgia's state revenues. Georgia state government revenues fell from about $22 billion at the outset of the recession in 2008 to just over $18 billion, I believe, 2 years ago, up to about $20 billion this year. There has been some increase in revenues and the growth of revenues in the recent last 2 years. Still, the decline in revenues overall has prompted several years of continuing budget cuts, austerity measures, etc. Given that, what's your greatest priority in regards to the Georgia state budget? Mr. Trammell.
Well, it'll be no surprise based on my previous answers that the number one priority in Georgia needs to be education, because the dollars we spend today will come back to us years down the road. And if we fail to spend those dollars today, we'll wind up paying more in the future because of the opportunities that our kids miss. And the jobs that the kids can take, they need to get prepared for, and education is that way. It's too important and too short-sighted to sacrifice and make those cuts on the backs of our kids today when we could invest today and benefit from that in the future.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Yes, definitely. I have been talking about this day in and day out. Our kids are the most important thing in the future of our state. And when I was running back in 2012, I was telling everybody the two things I would never cut. I would not cut education or law enforcement. And if they keep cutting education, we better not cut law enforcement because we're going to need it. So they even sent a message down here and said, quit telling people you're not going to cut this and cut that, you know, just worry about winning. But that's not me. When I get to the House, I will never vote to cut education of our kids or cut law enforcement. But if there was something that needed to be cut in education, if you'll go online tonight, you can see that on an upper level of the state level of employees, you'll see 12 to 15 people with the same job description making $175,000 a year. I'd be more than happy to focus on cutting and trimming that so our kids have got school books and playgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell, rebuttal?
Sounds like we agree on education being the top priority. So
That's right.
And with that, would you have anything more?
I'm glad we're both on the right page of education and look forward to it.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you both. We'll go on to our next question. I believe, Mr. King, you're going to be the first to answer this time.
Okay.
And our next one is about transportation and infrastructure in our state. 2 years ago, voters in Coweta County and throughout the counties that make up the Three Rivers Regional Development Commission roundly rejected the regional 1-cent transportation special local option sales tax at that time, as did most regions across Georgia. The T-SPLOST was offered as a way to fund a significant shortfall, as many saw it, in state transportation dollars. There have been continued conversations at the state level since that T-SPLOST vote about new approaches to funding roads and infrastructure. What solutions do you favor? Mr. King, we'll turn to you first.
Well, right off the bat, District 132 voted 65 to 35% against T-SPLOS, and I am against T-SPLOS. I think most of the people in our district feel like they're not getting a return for their money and it's being spent in Atlanta and other places. I feel that the best alternative would be to scrap the regions, to scrap these regions and let the counties form their own transportation and maybe work with the local 2, 3, and 4 districts and let them figure out whether they want to have their own SPLOS and what projects that they can present to the community that they're going to focus on and spend the money on. People are tired of seeing money being wasted and spent.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell.
The T-SPLOS was an opportunity for regions to determine whether or not their transportation projects could be funded by a 1-cent tax. And although it failed in our region, some regions adopted it. So right now what we have is an inequality where some regions are getting excellent transportation, they're getting their roads paid for, and regions like ours are not getting that. So the legislature has to do something to address that inequality. And that means going and taking priority lists to the legislature to try to get funded. But I'm not against putting another T-SPLOS on the ballot for the voters to determine their own transportation priorities and let the voters decide. Because quite frankly, in District 132, it is too expensive for the counties and the taxpayers to carry their own way on transportation projects within the county itself.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King, rebuttal?
I guess the only thing I can say to that is I'm relying on the votes of District 132 to go to the House and represent y'all, and 65% voted no against the T-SPLOS, so I would have to stand with the constituents of my district and continue on working on a local issue instead of supporting T-SPLOS.
All right. Mr. Trammell, response?
Anybody who's ever been stuck in Atlanta traffic understands, or not just Atlanta traffic, but south of Atlanta, here in Coweta County, trying to get to work in Atlanta or someplace north of Atlanta, understands that transportation is a regional issue, and transportation is going to need a regional solution.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Let me ask follow-up to that question, if you would. I think, Mr. Trammell, we're going to turn to you first. But talking about some of the things that have been discussed with transportation, there's been some conversation going on statewide and at the state level regarding the fourth penny of the gas tax and how it's allocated. Currently, that fourth penny, the revenues generated by that fourth penny of the gas tax, goes to the general fund, not to transportation improvements. Should it go toward transportation exclusively? Mr. Trammell, we'll start with you.
I think that all revenue at the state level, including this penny that you're talking about, deserves examination. But whether or not it should go specifically to transportation at the expense of something like our kids is something that I will not do. I will not put our state's budget on the back of kids. So if that means that when you allocate that penny to roads exclusively and you deprive some kid of their future and the opportunity to take those jobs of tomorrow and get the training that he or she needs, I'm not going to be for that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King.
No, I don't think it should go into the general fund. The problem we have right now is wasteful spending or not focusing on where the cut should be and so forth, just like cutting education when it shouldn't be. If there's a way for that, since it is a penny tax on the fuel, and that's what transportation is all about, I'd like to see it, if it can be designated to the counties that are receiving it, that penny tax, I'd like to see it be able to go back to the county and let them decide and work on transportation for their local community.
Okay, thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Trammell?
I don't have any rebuttal.
Very good. We'll move on to our next question. Our next question, in fact, has to do with economic development. I believe Mr. King is going to get the first question this time. What, in your opinion, is the role of our state government in economic development? Is Georgia a competitive state in terms of attracting investment and growing businesses here? Do you support tax incentives or other measures to recruit or retain good businesses here in Georgia? And we'll start with you, Mr. King.
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. I served on the Industrial Development Authority of Meriwether County for 4 years. Georgia has a lot to offer, especially with the port and with the world's largest airport and so forth. But maybe some tax cuts to these the industries that are on a state level. But the experience I've seen here working with Meriwether County, when you start bringing companies into your local small community, and you're already a tier 1 county and you're struggling, it's hard to give them a 10-year tax abatement. You know, you give them property, you give them this, and then 10 years, I'm seeing companies come from other parts of the state to our place and asking for us to help them to open up the company in Meriwether County. And I asked one guy one time, I said, let me ask you, how long ago was it when you started in South Georgia? He said, well, it was 10 years ago. And I said, so what it is, it's ran out, so now you come in here. So I'm not for all those cuts right off the bat, because it really hurts the, you know, I don't know if it's creating enough jobs and revenue for our counties, you know, that I live in. It's a tier 1.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trammell, rebuttal?
I think this is my opportunity to answer, right?
Oh, I apologize. Yes, it is. I was used to our last question, but please, it is your answer. Thank you, sir.
The state has a large role to play in economic development, and if for no other reason it is that Georgia is in competition for these jobs and industries locating here in areas like our district with states all over the South and all over the country. So what we can do is we can look to the state to get involved at the local level and help bring incentives to offer businesses to locate here. But we can't forget about small and medium-sized businesses that are already here. And what we need is fair tax policy so that those business owners who are already here can benefit and continue to grow. Because the issue is not just about economic development, it's about economic sustainability. We want good businesses here. We want our people to come to economic development and go to those businesses so they can live, work, and play close to home, and they can have more full opportunities without having to drive an hour to go to work.
Thank you, Mr. Trammell. I apologize for that. Mr. King, rebuttal.
I don't know if it's a rebuttal. I guess it's just another thing we're going to agree on. But as I was serving the IDA board in Meriwether County, I presented that to them, that we're reaching out to these companies trying to come into our county and offering all these exemptions and spending thousands and thousands of dollars, while I sit around and watch my local small businesses that were struggling, that we could actually be focusing our money that's from our county into our county and help them get on their feet a little better, hire some more employees, and then once you get to a certain level, you can focus on bringing the big industries.
Mr. Trammell, response?
The only thing I'll say is that in West Georgia, we've been particularly successful with the state playing a large role in economic development. You have to look no further down the road to Kia and all the automotive suppliers that have moved north. And that means jobs in our community. That's extra dollars in the pockets of merchants. And that's a good thing, and I support that. And we'll continue to work to do that here in District 132.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, both of you. One more tax and economic question, somewhat particular to a lot of folks in our region and Coweta County and throughout our region. And that is that Coweta County benefits from film and TV being produced here and throughout this whole area. Conversations are being held about whether or not to extend the tax credit to post-production activities as well. Would you support expansion of the film and TV tax credit in some form? We start with Mr. Trammell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to look no further than Sonoy or Grantville to know that this tax incentive, this tax credit has worked. It's made Georgia a leader in the film industry, and I would be supportive of any effort to continue that.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. King.
Well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I support it 100%. I've worked with several of the movies that were filmed throughout Coweta County over the years. We've got a studio that's just been built in Fayette County, if anyone hasn't been by to see it. But this studio over there, this is supposed to be the largest studio throughout the nation, and they're still building it and adding on. So the revenue that it brings to our community from hotels, fuel expenses, people are renting houses, you know, staying in hotels. I think what we gain from it, they deserve to keep having a tax break.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Trammell, rebuttal?
No rebuttal to that.
All right. Then we're going to go on. Y'all have been very patient. We've talked about a number of economic issues. We'll move on to a few others, and we're going to talk about something that y'all talked about a great deal already in this forum, and that's education. And I believe our first question is going to go to Mr. King, and it is a general question. In your opinion, what approach would you like to see the state take with K-12 education right now in Georgia? How do we empower local communities while ensuring our students remain globally competitive? We'll start with you, Mr. King.
Right off the bat, I'm not for Common Core. I don't think it's the right program from Georgia. It's the federal government comes in and hangs this money over your head and tells you you're only going to get it if you do this, and that is absolutely wrong. I think the local school boards, the teachers, and the parents know what's best for their community and what's best for their kids, and the best thing they could do is let each county throughout the state have full control of their education, quit cutting the education financing, give them the money they need into the schools throughout the state of Georgia, and let them have full control.
Mr. Trammell.
So there are two things. The first thing, we ought to be fully funding the QBE formula to make sure that our public school students have the money and the resources they need. We haven't done that in 14 years. We've underfunded it to the tune of $700 million to $800 million a year over that 14-year period, and several of those years to the tune of $1 billion a year. On the issue of Common Core, I am for a standard, because the reality is this. Our kids today aren't competing just with students in Fayette County or Gwinnett County or DeKalb County or students in Alabama. They're competing with students all over the nation and all over the world. And if we don't have a standard, what are you going to do? If it's not Common Core, then what standard? We need a standard so that our kids have the opportunity to succeed and that we have an opportunity to measure and see whether the investment that we're making in education is the right investment and that we're doing the right things, or whether we need to do other things for our kids.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King, rebuttal?
Again, we do not need Common Core. We do not need the bureaucrats in Atlanta telling us how, in Coweta County, Meriwether County, how to run your schools. If you got a good superintendent, you got good school board members you elect there, and teachers and the parents are working together, they're going to set a standard. You don't need a state to tell you or the federal government to tell you what the standard is. They should be able to come up with the standard and produce good quality children graduating from school and ready to move on. Some of the teachers are telling me that things that they have to do and follow, with all the paperwork and things they have to fill out and do with this Common Core, they hardly even have time to focus on their kids.
Mr. Trammell.
So in life, when these kids graduate, they're going to be in a marketplace where there is a standard. And that standard is going to measure them not from where they were relative to their individual county, but it's going to measure them where they stand in the marketplace of the world. And so if it's not Common Core, what are you going to replace it with? And I believe in local control, and local control allows the implementation of a local curriculum, but we can't tomorrow decide that we're going to play football on a 50-yard field even though all the rest of the world plays it on a 100-yard field. That would do a disservice to our kids, and our kids deserve better.
Gentlemen, we have a couple of other questions about education that we'd like to get to. We had actually had the question down about Common Core to see what you have both discussed it at this point. I'm just going to, and if you don't, that's fine, but I don't want to cut this short if you have some more, a bit more to say. On the issue of Common Core, and I think, Mr. Trammell, we would start with you on this. What direction should we go in at this point?
Thank you. I thank you for the question, but I think we have a clear difference on this. I'm for a standard. If it's Common Core is what we have now. It's supported by the military. It's supported by the National Chamber of Commerce. Our kids deserve a fair measuring stick. We need to know because they will be in the global marketplace, and that'll be the measuring stick when they're out of college, when they're out of secondary school. But what would you replace it with? And that's the question that I would pose to Mr. King, that if it's not the Common Core standard, what would you put in its place?
And then same to you, Mr. King. What direction would you go in?
Well, without a doubt, I mean, we need a standard, but we don't need a Common Core. We don't need the federal government telling the state of Georgia, you only get this money if you do this or do that. If anybody in here was born, I guess, probably in the 60s or 70s, and back then, I don't know how many successful people are probably sitting in this room tonight, went off to college, and they didn't even know nothing about Common Core back in those days. So, to me, I run everything like a business. If you elect good school board officials, board members, you got a good school superintendent, you got good principals in your school, they should be working together to put together a standard for that school. The parents should be telling them what we expect for our kids to be accomplishing and coming out of that school. And if they're not getting it, then that's where the changes need to be made.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell, response?
I do have some rebuttal to that.
Okay.
The reality is that the world is a lot smaller than it was in the day that my granddaddy and granny were on that dairy farm. And that may have worked at one time when things were more local and the world was a lot bigger. But because the world is smaller, we have to think bigger. And we have to understand that we're competing not just against the counties around us, not just against the states around us, not even against the countries around us. We're competing against students in China, India, all over the world for those jobs of tomorrow. And if we don't give our students the benefit of a measuring stick, then we're doing them a disservice.
Response, Mr. King?
I just short and sweet. I'm a boss man. I'm a businessman. If you don't set some standards for your employees, your company can't grow. If you don't have great leadership in your schools and local schools to help these kids develop the standards they need, that's where the problem is really lying right there and needs to be focused on. So I mean, and the state of Florida is celebrating. They just overturned Common Core.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for that vigorous discussion. We appreciate that. We have a couple of other education questions. We'll turn to you first, Mr. King.
I'll try my best.
Currently, the State Board of Education is appointed by the governor. There's been legislation introduced to make the State Board of Education elected by the people, say by congressional district. Do you support an elected Board of Education at the state level? Mr. King.
Well, yes, I do. I believe that the people should elect their representatives, and whenever possible, I would support such an amendment. I'm always supportive of letting the people of the area of the state always make decisions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell.
I believe in the democratic process, but I think that's an issue that we should go slowly on. Because if there's one thing that's hurt our kids, it's that we have too much politics in education already. And the idea that we would open it up for more politics, it just doesn't sound like the students will be the winner in that scenario.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. King?
Fine, thank you.
Move on to another question. This one will go to Mr. Trammell first. Not all high school students desire or have the scholastic ability, perhaps, to go to college. How can schools, in your opinion, better prepare students for jobs with skills that pay well, with careers, with futures that pay above the minimum wage?
I think we have to look at workforce development opportunities and examples like the career academies that one is opening up in Troup County. And that's to take it's a partnership between the local school system, existing industry, and the students get the benefit of preparing for specific skill sets that they can take into the workforce. And the companies get the benefit of a trained and ready labor force that comes out. I think we've got to do more in that regard, and I think we also have to make sure that our students have access to that. And that means expanding the access to our technical college programs outside of career academies and making sure that students who want to avail themselves of that opportunity have it in Georgia, because we need it for workforce development and to be able to recruit better industry.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King.
I think I've touched on this earlier tonight. I didn't go off to college. I didn't want to. I could have. I didn't want to. I went straight into the work field. I've been very successful. I've tried to help other young kids and people throughout the community. I've been telling everyone, and I'm going to reach out to the House to help me accomplish this. I think we need a facility here in District 132 that takes people that are unemployed. You see here on the news, they've been unemployed for months and months and months. But these trades are important, folks. The generation that's growing up right now has been focusing on going off to college, sitting in a cubicle and doing everything on a computer. Kids today don't even know how to change a light bulb or mow the yard. I mean, they could probably play a Game Boy or something, but that's about, So I want to reach out to them for them to realize that you can be self-employed, you can own a trade. And before this recession hit, and I'm still here at 33 years strong, before this recession hit, I told everybody, a doctor or lawyer didn't have anything on me, and I didn't go off to college. So I want to help others to have that same opportunity to be a self-employed and own a company.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Trammell? All right. We have a question before we get on to, we're going to go on, by the way, in a few moments to talk about health care a little bit. But before we get there, one question that we've gotten, what's your opinion on Georgia's gun laws right now, particularly the recent expansion of carry permits and so on? And I believe we are starting with Mr. King on this one.
That'd be great. I'm full supporter of the Second Amendment. I like the new law they passed. I think some things were missed here. All this arguing about, you can take it here and take it there. I think it'd been easier just to put where you can't take it, and then if you got a permit and you're a law-abiding citizen, take it everywhere else you want to go. I think the churches should make the decision if they want to have self-defense, just like we do as individuals, to protect their church nowadays with the way things go on throughout society. But anything to protect the rights of the citizens of Georgia to have their guns and have them on there and have their protection, I'm fully supportive of that. Nowadays, when you hear a shooting on the news, some guy takes a gun and shoots 2 or 3 people. They're all over the news. Take our guns, take our guns, take our guns, and they're bad for us. And guns is what kill people, not the crazy guy. But just what happened here not too long ago with the employee being beheaded by another employee. Thank goodness that the owner of the company was toting a gun and was able to stop it. But you don't hear nothing on the news about applauding him for packing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell.
I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'm proud of my A rating from the National Rifle Association. And I'm the only candidate in this race with an A rating from the National Rifle Association.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. King?
I didn't know he had the only rating. I'm a National Rifle Association member. I've been supported by them, and I'm supported by the POA, the police officers of the state of Georgia. I've been with the NRA for a long time, so I don't know what the rating it is, but I'm supportive of loading your ammo and having your guns.
All right. Thank you, sir. Response, Mr. Trammell?
National Rifle Association's ratings speak for themselves, and you can go online and find it.
All right. Thank you both, gentlemen. Appreciate it. We also have a question from the floor. I think this one goes to you first, Mr. Trammell. What is your stand on the marriage issue, the issue of one man, one woman, or otherwise? Mr. Trammell.
The voters decided this issue in Georgia in 2004, and in other states there's been litigation. It's gone through the federal court systems and is before the United States Supreme Court. It's going to be incumbent upon our Attorney General to monitor that and to make sure that he responds accordingly.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King.
Same thing. All 159 counties in the state of Georgia was for keeping traditional marriage, and I think we should continue. It was 82% in Coweta County and 84% in Troup County. I think if any time it ever was to be changed, it has to be presented to the people and let them vote and decide on. I don't think we need judicial courts sitting there making the decision for the country.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Trammell? If not, we'll go to a series of questions about health care, and we'll start with Mr. King on this one. Health care spending makes up a significant portion of state spending. Medicaid and Peach Care account for, I believe, approximately 12% or so of Georgia's budget. What, in your opinion, is the state of our health care obligations here in Georgia? Mr. King.
Well, first of all, I think the Medicare program in the state of Georgia is broken. It needs to be worked on. It needs to be reformed. People keep saying we should take the money from the federal government and to help support health care in the state of Georgia. But, that money's got to be paid back. And the state of Georgia is on a tight budget already. So, but I would love to see everyone in the state of Georgia be able to have health care and deserve to have health care. But we've got to figure out a way to finance it and pay for it in the state of Georgia without raising taxes.
Mr. Trammell.
400,000 Georgians tonight will go to sleep without health care coverage because our governor and our legislature decided not to take the federal funding that was there to expand Medicaid and cover those Georgians, and that's not right. And I'm sad to report that today it's more difficult for Georgia to take those funds than it was a year ago because the legislature passed a bill that took that decision away from the governor and put it in the hands of the General Assembly. In terms of funding the Medicaid expansion will be fully funded by the federal government until 2017. It represents for every $1 that Georgia spends on Medicaid expansion, there will be $14.46 produced by the federal government to match. And in addition to that, for every dollar spent by Georgia, there is a $30.45 economic impact, which would be over the span of 10 years, $65 billion in investment, and represents 56,000 new jobs. Not only is it the right thing to expand Medicaid, but it's the best business decision for Georgia.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King?
To me, this is one reason right here We do not need to send a liberal lawyer to Atlanta. We need to send a businessman. We cannot. They keep focusing on we don't accept the money from the federal government. The federal government is borrowing money constantly. So why would we want in the state of Georgia to put a burden throughout the nation? We need to focus this on a Georgia level and not take the money from the federal government and have that held over us. He says until 2017 or whatever the time is, but we've got to start paying it back. And we're on a tight budget now, and we're sitting here talking about our schools being cut and law enforcement being cut. So where's that money going to come from? That's my biggest focus is, we cannot put a tax burden on the state of Georgia right now, and we're going to rely on the federal government to give us money, and they couldn't even open up a website. So I just don't understand that we're going to let them tell us they're going to give us this money. Where are they getting it from? The federal government is in straits. We've got to focus on cutting the budget from the state all the way to Washington.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell?
I'm running for state legislature and not Congress. And the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, and the money has been offered by the federal government and is there. Right now, our tax dollars go to states like West Virginia and Kentucky, where they are taking the Medicaid expansion. And we're sending Georgia dollars over there and not getting the benefit. 400,000 Georgians that could be covered by just taking the funding offered by the federal government. That's worth it. And in terms of what it cost us more not to take it, because we all pay higher premiums because those Georgians that don't have coverage, when they show up, when they're really, really sick in emergency rooms, that is the highest, most expensive way that you can pay for medical care. We can do better in Georgia. Georgia State has a Public Policy Institute study that says that when you calculate the insurance premium taxes and the state taxes that will be collected as a result of the Medicaid expansion, the net cost over the 10-year period is less than 0.2% of the Georgia budget, and it only amounts to about $230 million.
Gentlemen, I just wanted to mention, we went back and forth on this exchange because it dovetailed very nicely with one of the questions we had, which was about this exact subject. And the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, and if you favored or what your thoughts were.
Well, first, do I get a rebuttal on what he just said?
That's what I was about to say.
Oh,
In fact,
okay.
I'm sorry, that's where I was going. Because that's why we allowed that much time as that. And what I'd like to do is go to you, in a sense, for a continuation of this, up to a 1-minute rebuttal and then a 1-minute rebuttal for Ms. Trammell, if y'all would like to continue that conversation. So, yes, sir, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Well, good. My opponent says he's not running for Congress, he's running for State House. Well, if you're going to sit there and do what Congress wants all the states to do, then I guess you'd be a lobbyist for them or something. I don't know. But the money that the federal government is holding right now, our tax dollars, if they would give us our money, that's our money, if they would give that to us right now, the state of Georgia could not fully fund, but fund health care in the state of Georgia up to 70%. Then that would give the legislation to start working on what they're going to do about the other 30% to help the people of the state of Georgia.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell?
They said no. They offered the money to cover 400,000 Georgians, and Georgia said no. And they did more than say no. They doubled down on it and made it more difficult for Georgia to take the money by saying that what had been a decision of the governor solely and exclusively, they were going to put in the hands of the General Assembly. And why did they do that? Because guess what? The governor's election is this year. And they wanted to make it so difficult, and they couldn't afford the chance that a governor might change and might accept the funding. So they made it more difficult. Friends, that is cynical politics at its worst. Representative democracy is about, if you don't agree with something that's happening at the state level, you go to the ballot box and cast your ballot, and you change it. Well, we were deprived of that in Georgia, and 400,000 Georgians were deprived of the opportunity to get health care, and our rural hospitals are paying the price for that costly decision.
Gentlemen, thank y'all very much for that lively exchange. I appreciate that. We have one other health care question. I think this goes to Mr. Trammell first. This one's been submitted to me. Only a couple of generations ago, many families had stay-at-home mothers who could care for elderly parents or extended families in that sense. Today, many people work well into their 70s, can't be available to care for those elderly parents. Nursing homes can be very expensive. Some families perhaps can't afford them. As a state representative, how would you like to see the problem addressed? Mr. Trammell.
Well, I think that elder care is an issue that is going to continue to present itself. I think the General Assembly has to take a look at policy proposals that will be friendly to the care of our seniors and will enable caretakers to get a benefit perhaps or a credit for doing that. I wish I had a silver bullet answer, but the truth is that it's something that is going to have to take some study, and we're going to have to roll up our sleeves. But I'll tell you one thing that we can certainly do that goes back to the Medicaid expansion issue. There are seniors who are not eligible yet because they're not old enough for Medicare, but who would qualify for Medicaid expansion. And they're facing the costliest health care period in their lives. And the lack of that health care coverage is putting a strain on families, a strain that we could alleviate if we accepted Medicaid expansion and took those federal dollars. But because of politics, we've opted not to do it, and we've made it more difficult.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King, same question.
Well, definitely the senior citizens in the state of Georgia need to have care. We need to help them. But again, it's the system that's broken. It's like Josh Kuhn said the other night, you don't put more passengers on the Titanic that's sinking. We've got to focus on doing an amendment, getting Medicare reformed in the state of Georgia so we know the money's going where it needs to be. It's not being a wasted expense. And just try the best we can for the state of Georgia. We keep talking about taking the fund from the federal government. I just don't feel that's the way to go for the state of Georgia.
Thank you very much, Mr. King. Mr. Trammell, rebuttal?
I think, again, that expanding that coverage would provide a benefit and would help some of these very families that the question is addressing. And if we can help some of those families, we ought to do it, because the long-term cost of not doing it in Georgia is too expensive.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King, response?
Well, it's just, as he mentioned earlier about, they can't qualify because of their age and so forth. But even our own federal government is sitting here, every time we turn around, they're raising the age limit of when you can retire and get Social Security because they can't even keep a budget. They're wasting the money. So they figure, well, we'll just make you work longer and get older before you can get your money. So here again, the federal government is not the answer to our health care at this time. We've got to focus on a state health care from Georgia.
All righty. Gentlemen, I just want to say y'all have been very patient under these warm lights and these great questions. I really want to appreciate it. I think y'all have kept your composure wonderfully, both of you. And we're about to get on to closing statements in a few moments, but we have one other question here from the audience. Mr. King, I believe you're going first this time. And it is, how specifically can you set aside partisan politics to help the middle class be viable again? And Mr. King, I'll turn to you.
Well, I focused on it, and I'm focused on it, and I'm just an example. Most of y'all know where Sargent is. 38 years ago, I lived in I rented a trailer in a trailer park in Sargent 38 years ago and was the manager of Wendy's of Newnan, okay? And I rode on a Yamaha 100 bike, and that's where I was doing. And one day I finally left there and got with American Can Company. But even when I was there for a few years on night shift, I said, there's got to be more to life, than doing what I'm doing and be your own boss and so forth. And I set out on my own to accomplish what I've accomplished. I've opened 4 different companies. I've built over 300 homes in Coweta County, Troup County, and so forth. So again, people do not realize that the tradesmen of this area are dying off. And I'm telling you, most companies are older people and their kids don't even want to follow in steps. There is a great opportunity for people throughout the state of Georgia to become entrepreneurs, own a business, and make well over $100,000 a year and be able to provide for the families and enjoy life.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell?
The simple answer is that I'll work with anyone who's ready to work on policies that will help the middle class, whether they be Republican or Democrat or independent. It's too important to let partisan politics enter the equation and keep us from achieving goals that we could achieve together. And I fundamentally believe that Georgians want a health care system and they want coverage for Georgians. They want to make sure that our rural hospitals stay open. They want to make sure that our kids get a good public education and go into the workforce prepared with the skills that they need. So, if that's a Republican governor, if that's a Democratic governor, if that's a Republican majority leader, I am prepared to work with whomever to make sure that we achieve those goals for the middle class, because Georgia's future is too important to let partisan politics intervene.
Thank you very much. Mr. King, rebuttal?
I'm good.
All righty. We are going to go with our closing statements. I turn my gentleman up here, remind me who is going to go first on this one.
Mr. King goes first, and Bob Trammell goes last.
And there we are then. We'll start with our closing statements, up to 3 minutes. Mr. King, you go first.
Well, first I'd like to thank everybody again for being here, and I didn't know it was going to be such an elaborate studio. I've been looking for the teleprompter the whole time I'm standing here, but thanks for coming out and thanks for hosting this. But we've heard a lot about I's and I can do this and I'll do that, and but this election isn't about the I's. This election is about you and what we'll do, who will fight for you. And I will go to Atlanta and fight for my district. I'll stand up for this district, and I've been standing up for this district. And how do you know I'll do this? It's because I've already led a bipartisan group back in several years ago. We came together and worked together to fight against a regional landfill that was ramrodded down Meriwether County's throats. And we were packing the houses out when they were having the meetings and so forth during this time. We'd have hundreds of people there, and and the community saw the passion that I had for our community and the citizens, and we didn't want this, and we all came together. And I'll take that same passion to fight for something that's right and to protect this District 132 to Atlanta. So, and neither party has the answers, and it's time that Atlanta knows and realizes that. But during this campaign, I have brought together blacks and whites, Democrats and Republicans working together, and we can make a better future for District 132. And I'd appreciate it very much on November the 4th to have your vote and your support. And definitely tell all your friends to get out and vote. It's very important for our community.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell, your closing comments.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your attention this evening as you've listened to both candidates. And what you've heard is that there are policy differences between the candidates. But it's not just what we stand for that matters, it's really who we stand for. And what this campaign is about it's about students like my little girls who'll grow up in a world where the competition will be fiercer than ever. The world will be smaller, and they'll be competing in a global marketplace for those jobs of tomorrow. And they need and deserve the opportunity to have a fully funded public education system so that they can take advantage of that and get the skills they need to compete in that global marketplace. It's about doing things like taking and expanding our workforce development programs for students who may not go the college route, but still have an opportunity to take advantage of jobs in existing industries and get good paying jobs that they can raise a family on. It's about those 400,000 Georgians who don't have health insurance that could have had health insurance had our state made a smarter and better decision. It's about the nurse and the doctor who work in that rural hospital, and the service providers and the vendors who provide services, and who will lose their jobs if Georgia doesn't get right quick and make decisions that will sustain our rural hospitals. It's about us. It's about who we want to be as Georgians. It's about where we want to go as Georgia. I'm Bob Trammell, and I'm asking for your vote because I believe that investing in people is the most important investment Georgia can ever make. And I believe that we've got to put Georgia's families first. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trammell, Mr. King, thank you both for coming here tonight, facing these questions in a public setting. Most of all, thank you for running for this office. We appreciate what you do. I think you did marvelously tonight, and I'd like to ask everybody to give you a round of applause.